Here it is, the big four things not to buy in retirement, right? Everyone wants to talk about what to do. There's a lot of fun things to do. You almost have this lottery effect. You get access to this $1 million IRA. You no longer have the kids' college. You no longer have a mortgage payment. You got this extra income. And you're saying to yourself, I want to spend some money. I want to live my best retirement. Here are the four things Greg is saying do not buy, please, in retirement. Number one is going to get a standing ovation, and everyone already agrees the nasty, nasty timeshare. Number one, do not ever buy a timeshare. Why? A lot of times they sound like great deals. I think the average initial purchase price of a timeshare is just big enough to be approachable, around $25,000. Most people are like, okay, that doesn't sound terrible. I get this for the rest of my life. Well, what they don't know is there's maintenance fees, there's annual fees. You can't, blackout dates. And it's usually thousands of extra dollars every year. And the place normally isn't that great. That's the problem with timeshares. Once you finally figure out what you got a studio in the back that's an hour and a half walk to the pool. And you're like, how did I end up here? You can't get out of them. You can't sell them. You don't know what's going on. And it's usually a high pressure sale environment. Whoever's been to one of those things, they think, oh, I'll have a free dinner. Next thing they know, they're in a 4x4 room sitting there with a heat lamp on them saying, don't you want this Hawaii timeshare? And then they end up buying it just because they're just like, you know what? I can't take this anymore. A study by the University of Central Florida, they would know, says 85% of timeshare owners who sign a contract regret doing it. So stay away. Number one, the timeshare. Number two, oh my gosh, boats. I know they seem cool. Oh, look at that. We'll be cruising with the family. It's amazing. We should go buy a boat. We just went out with some friends with a boat. Their kids were skiing. It was amazing. Let's do this. Please don't. If you're not a boater, don't do it. Now, I can say this as a boater. I learned how to ski before I could ride a bike. I've been on the water my whole life. People don't understand the nuances of boat ownership. Now, let's talk about the financial stuff first. Boats are freaking expensive, especially the new ski boats. We're not talking about 50,000, 100,000. A new ski Nautique, an 18-foot ski Nautique or Malibu or Mastercraft is roughly $200,000. If you want a pontoon, a cruising party barge, these can be as much as $100,000, receiving average costs around $50,000 to $60,000. Don't forget the taxes. Oh, by the way, where do you put this darn thing? There are dock fees that nobody thinks about. Well, what if you don't dock it? Well, then you have to store it somewhere. Are you going to put it in your driveway? That's going to look pretty in your neighborhood. Your neighbors are going to love you. But the reality is the first time a family goes out on a boat and it's 85 degrees and there's no shade. And after about 5 minutes, they start looking at each other like, what do we do now? Well, no one skis, no one wakeboards, and it's hot and they're thirsty and they're hungry and they didn't pack the right picnic basket because they're on the water all day. These are things that are complicated. What about how do we get the boat into the water? If you want to have fun, watch husband and wives for the first time try to back their boats in who are first-time boat owners. It is high comedy. Boat ownership is something you need to think long and hard about. Unless you live on the ocean or on the river, I would think twice if you're not a avid boater or spend a lot more time doing it before you take the plunge, quite literally. Big number three. Do not loan people money. This sounds terrible. Now, I know it feels good. Hey, my nephew, my son, my granddaughter, my uncle, my neighbor. Hey, they have this great business idea. No, they don't. It's not a great idea. If it was a great idea, they would have easily got funding through a bank. And what ends up happening is it's not a monetary I know people are like, I lost 20,000, I lost 50,000. It costs you a relationship. That's really what happens with these things. It's not a monetary loss. When a friend can't pay you back, or it's uncomfortable, they feel shame or they feel anger, or there's a back and forth, or there's a misunderstanding. It's like partnerships. Please do not make large gifts or sums of money to family members or friends under the guise of a loan. They never work out. I want to say that the recent survey said 60% of those who had lent money to a friend or paid a group expense had a bad experience. Over half of these don't work out. And the fourth thing not to spend your money on in retirement is buying a place in Florida. I know, that's all we wanted to do. That's what we dreamt of. Let me tell you the realities of this. You know how it's hard to maintain your house? Now you have two of them. Except for one of them, is thousands of miles away. And you have HOA fees that you probably didn't think about. And then you have upkeep. Now, guess what happens to your insurance? There is a hurricane every 17 minutes going through Florida. And I know what you're going to say, but I love going down there. Then go down there. I talked my mom and dad. By the way, it was an arm wrestling match for 5 years with Big John and Sandy. If you listen to the show, I talk about it all the time. They're a great case study. They wanted to buy a place in Florida so bad. And I said, you know what? Why don't you just rent a place for a month or two? And guess what? They started doing it and they're like, holy moly, this is awesome. Because they get a leave. They don't have to worry about it. They have a set amount of money and a set amount of time, and they only think about it once a year. And the best part is they've tried different places. They get to bounce around down the Gulf Coast of different locations every year. And when they're down there, part of the fun is trying to find where they're going to stay the next time. And if they really like a place, they might do it 2 seasons in a row. I find that most grandparents have huge regret. And here's when it happens. It doesn't happen the first year. What ends up happening is you have grandkids that start doing sports, and you want to be around those sports year round. And if you have a bunch of grandkids where you live, you want to be there. You want to be around family. You want to be around all this stuff. And if you're thousands of miles away, you're by yourself with your spouse. And while the weather may be better for 3 or 4 months a year, a lot of times it's not worth the cost. And then you have the guilt. When you're up north, guess what happens when you're in Michigan or Pennsylvania, Indiana, Ohio? We got to get down there. We got to go down there. We have to go down there. We have to get our money's worth. And so you start feeling this anxiety that you have to manufacture, even though you don't really want to go down there. You start going down there and you're away from your friends and your life. That's what life's all about, is relationships. But at the end of the day, it's a financial problem. If you have enough money to easily do it, then it's probably not that big of a deal. I can appreciate having a family spot down on the water. You buy a great place where the family conglomerates a couple times a year. That's awesome. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a mom and dad relocating down to Florida or buying a place that they use just for themselves. So keep that in mind. The big 4 things not to buy in retirement. The first, timeshares. The second, boats. The third, gifts to family members. And fourth is buying a place just for you and your spouse to go visit in Florida or Arizona on your own. It doesn't have a family makeup component. Can be the no-nos when it comes to your retirement dollars.